Hello, welcome to an episode of Wing Zero Symphonics. And on this episode, we're going to touch on Anthony's non-duality, simple, direct, and effective. And so I had attempted to bring about a sort of non-dualistic inquiry together. And it didn't gain very much traction because the very platform, YouTube, is not set for that kind of inquiry together. Everything about the platform is necessarily centralized and dualistic to a degree that prompts the user to correlate that with the status quo, with the standard. And so, what is competitive on YouTube is high production value versus low. Knowledge, memory, and experience versus knowledge or experience that is not brought forth by an expert or by someone who knows, someone who's famous, someone who has a lot of money. And certainly there's content that's somewhere in between, and of a new non-dualistic sort is what I'm referring to. And so on YouTube, upon watching Jiddu Krishnamurti, which is a very slow-paced, very challenging sort of look into things together. On my feed, YouTube, the algorithm, right, which is the conditioned perspective based on knowledge, memory, and experience, right, much like the brain, but we'll get into that, of what are the components of a simple, direct, and effective non-dualistic approach. And so in the feed, I get non-dualist speakers, either of a Buddhist tradition or of a Hindu tradition, or of a modern day, let's say, non-secular approach. And throughout watching and looking and learning, I found that both the traditional approach is limited to a figure, meaning the Buddha, or a guru, one who knows. And the non-secular approach tends to be scattered, which goes ahead and has phrases repeated, and its effectiveness is hampered as a result, wherein both approaches have not fundamentally changed society. And is it because non-duality is something which cannot be expressed through words, yet we must use knowledge, memory, and experience to communicate for societies to function? So this is where we get into a myriad of questions I could have posed. I could have posed that question, or I could have posed several others where inconsistencies permeate. And so a simple, direct, and effective approach, then, looks to be able to come upon where non-duality as an action is most effective, and as well as that action of non-duality lending back towards the necessary dualistic functions of the body, the brain, the mind, the self, and its reflection in society. Now I'll give you an example as to what exactly do I mean. So my non-duality journey is one that quickly went from a certain path, maybe Wayne Dyer books. Remember Dr. Wayne Dyer on meditation and then spirituality and psychology, and mixture of the three, into Jiddu Krishnamurti when that path became pathless. And the thing about a pathless land is that it's daunting, it's infinite, it's empty. It's equally infinite as it is empty. So for someone to be as serious as one can be in order to figure out for oneself what unconditional freedom means, both in terms of freedom and order, and conditionality being where there's no friction, no fragmentation, no conflict, so order is brought about. Where that balance lies. And it wasn't until my late 20s where the pathless land found that I found on this pathless land that the mental and the physical need not be separate, and that perhaps a physical art could lend back towards a mental cultivation, and vice versa. So I'd say that my teachers, and I guess we'll get into that later, my teachers have been able to incorporate emptiness, right? The quality of silence, simplicity, as well as the quality of infiniteness. Now, infiniteness, I mean in reference to all things that are happening, which necessarily must be contained through knowledge, memory, and experience, filtered through knowledge, memory, and experience, understood through the mechanism of memory, of thought. And so, to find that balance between the two is something that I have been impressed upon by my teachers. So now, an example of that cultivation would be perhaps looking at the inquiring together and being like, okay, inquiring together on YouTube, not going to happen. That's not a realistic way of looking at bringing about a inquiry with myself together with an audience who's also as serious about inquiring together about the nature of oneself with a speaker or a friend, let's say, or a relationship person, someone you really don't know. And instead, that'll evolve and make its way into decentralized social media. But decentralized social media ain't quite there yet. So that's where in all things knowledge, memory, and experience, I'm able to be effective moving forward. So, what else is there about non-duality that's simple, direct, and effective that can be maybe summarized here, and in the later videos we can get into it more specifically? How about the function of the brain, where attention is had, and when attention is had, one of the functions of the brain, which is projector-like, which is the image-making process, right? Sensory information that is gathered and stored and is able to have a, let's say, a replicant of the actual sensory information. When attention is had, that function is put to the side, put to rest. Those brain cells are put to rest, right? Which means they won't burn out, which means they won't wear out. And instead, a deeper function of the brain takes place. And what's notable about the functioning of the brain is not just that it works oddly similar to computers, but that this computer is one which mutates itself. Its actual hardware begins to mutate and can become optimized according to what is. Can non-duality bring a level of responsiveness which fits in to what is? Which means the non-dualist, at the point where duality is necessary in communication, can ebb and flow, can be able to figure for oneself and adapt as to where knowledge, memory, and experience can be cultivated in order to maximize results, which lends back towards resolution of inner conflict and, of course, outer conflict. And wherein simplicity of a empty sort is the most efficient manner of approaching one's day-to-day life, wherein one's day-to-day life, and vice versa. And a non-dualist approach can vary of this sort, of an adaptable sort, of a fluid sort. Can adapt and change according to one's needs, circumstances, lifestyle, age, and perhaps condition as well. So, the function of the brain, its deep function, the cultivation of neural pathways, the health of a brain, which is physical and mental. Brain extends to the nervous system, even to the gut, and all around. So there is no separation then in what aspects of daily living are not a part of the non-dualist approach.